Welcome back to Quarantine Apologetics, defending the faith while under lockdown. I'm Allan Ruhl. I want to talk about my favorite philosopher. Now, in terms of philosophy, I'm not an expert. I don't really focus my apologetics there. I'm more in church history, theology, biblical exegesis. Now, there are more apologists out there. People like Tim Gordon, who are very good at philosophy. But if you were to ask me who's my favorite philosopher, I would say Joseph de Maistre. And he's part of a school called the Counter-Enlightenment. The Counter-Enlightenment obviously was against the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment, its highlight was the French Revolution. And the Enlightenment hated all faiths, but it hated the Catholic Church the most. Why? Because it was powerful. It represented the biggest threat to the Enlightenment. And so people like Maistre were arguing against the French Revolution because it starts out with a few innocent ideas. Then all of a sudden you get 1789. There's nothing wrong with throwing out ideas. But when 1789 happens, all bets are off the table. So that's why Joseph de Maistre, Louis de Bonald, René de Chateaubriand, Juan Donoso Cortés, he's a Spaniard. Most of them are French because it happened in France. That's when things exploded. And what we need to know is the Enlightenment hates all faith, but it hates the Catholic Church the most. Why was the American Revolution so more civil than the French Revolution? Why? They happened relatively in the same time period. They were both Enlightenment revolutions. But why was the American one far more civil than the French one? Because America is Protestant, and not uniformly Protestant. There's tons of sects, and tons of sects, you can't even name them all. And so the revolution in America had no religious opposition. So therefore, it looked a lot. They didn't have to engage in the horrible stuff they did in France. But believe me, if America was Catholic, if there was monasteries everywhere, if there was Catholic priests and friars walking through the streets and grottos where you would go to venerate the relics of saints and all that stuff, and it was 99% Catholic, then it would have looked like the French Revolution. So, in terms of philosophy, if you want to get started on reading, what we need is to read more of him, Joseph de Maistre. Joseph de Maistre. There's a few others, I've named them, but start with Maistre. And it's so obvious now that the Enlightenment has failed. Democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, it's all failed. And if you want to know how, just look in the streets. I'm not talking about coronavirus. I'm just talking about just what's going on in our culture. Just watch the average show produced by Netflix. Like, it's just horrific. Or, it's sad, really. It's sad. But to get around this, we need to read the Counter-Enlightenment. This movement has been airbrushed from history. We all know about Voltaire and those idiots. We need to chuck Voltaire and replace him with Joseph de Maistre. He grew up as a Freemason and sympathetic to Enlightenment ideas. Then the French Revolution happened. Then he was done with the Freemasonry and done with all this nonsense. He knew that Jesus Christ is the answer to what was going on in France and everywhere else in the world. So read Joseph de Maistre. Most of it's available online for free. If you can read French like I can, you can get, I think, his whole collection, even his private correspondence. But there's quite a bit in English too. He's written on the Spanish Inquisition. He's written on the papacy. He was the ambassador to St. Petersburg. So, yeah, no, he's a great guy. Read as much Joseph de Maistre as possible, and we will take back our civilization from these enemies of Jesus Christ. Primarily the Enlightenment, but not exclusively. All right, God bless. Stay safe, stay healthy, pray the rosary, and I will see you tomorrow.